I had the best of intentions to walk those 300 feet across the hall to get started on time, but that's what happens. We will have a bill hearing today and then a couple of presentations and updates. Committee, we have worked on next week's schedule, and that is the last week before turnaround, if you can imagine that already. Wow. So we're going to do 2 bills, I think, every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If those work and you play nice, we'll probably do final action on the bills heard Thursday and not meet on Friday of next week, and have called the chair on the last day we can meet, and that will be the 17th, if we need to, just for purposes, but I think we'll be done, and then we'll start to be on the floor. Just so you're aware, if you want to look online, if you have interest, we'll have some pretty heavy lifts. We'll do the bill on the water task force. We'll do the bill on the rural lawyers to bring loan forgiveness for rural lawyers, along with the ethanol tax. It is a tax credit bill, but we're going to probably be moving it to a grant bill, and we'll talk about that through the process. So those, along with some other ones, a couple of ones dealing with dam safety, I believe, and so on. So we have a lot of different things that will be coming up next week. So you might want to bring your computer to follow along with the bills. And if you do have any amendments to those, work with Kyle. So wanted you to be aware of that. So what we will do to start off with is we will have a hearing on House Bill 2064. And that is dealing with a bill that KDHE brought. So we'll call on Kyle Hoffman from the Revisor's Office to brief us on this bill.
I do get a lot of Kyle Hoffman's emails, but I am Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Well, his presence is still here, so Kyle Hoffman, sorry about that. At least I call you Dustin Hoffman. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So House Bill 2064, under current law, no one is allowed to construct, alter, or operate a solid waste processing facility or a solid waste disposal area of a solid waste management system without first obtaining a permit from the Secretary of Health and Environment. However, exceptions to this permit requirement can be found in KSA 65-3407C. And so this bill would amend that list of exceptions to remove the current exception for solid waste generated by drilling oil and gas wells that is disposed through the practice of land spreading. So that practice would no longer be exempted from the requirement to be permitted by Health and Environment. The bill would become effective upon publication in the statute book. And with that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions before our conferees come up.
Any questions, Representative Mosley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so that I understand what you're saying, this is a more restrictive bill from the current practice that we are doing, or less restrictive?
In the current system, you can see the stricken language in the bill that's current law. It sort of created a new hybrid system where people practicing this didn't have to get a permit through the department, but they still had to kind of go through the state corporation and kind of go through a different process. But with this being stricken out, they would have to go through the general permitting process. But I'll leave it to the proponents to discuss if it's more strict or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions for Mr. Hamilton? Seeing none, thank you. Heather, is there a fiscal note we can tell us about?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. According to KDHE and the Kansas Corporation Commission, the enactment of the bill would not have a fiscal effect on either agency. KDHE did note in the fiscal note that there has not been an application for this exception since 2013.
Very good. Thank you, Heather. Any questions for Heather? Seeing none, we will move forward. Our first proponent will be Joe Dahm, the Director of Bureau of Waste Management with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. Mr. Dahm, welcome to committee.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Rogers and members of the committee. I am Joseph Dahm. I am the Director of the Bureau of Waste Management for the Department of Health and Environment. And as you're aware, House Bill 2064 would remove the current permitting exemption for the disposal of drilling wastes using a land application. These drilling wastes are solid waste, primarily water-based drilling muds created during the drilling of oil and gas wells, but they still meet that definition of a solid waste in the statutes. Quick 1-minute history. In 2012, looking what was happening in other states, it was anticipated that there would be an increase in horizontal drilling associated with the Mississippi lime plague. And horizontal drilling produces a lot more drilling waste than what a traditional vertical well would cause. And we're talking about 500,000 gallons in drilling mud. In addition to that, with horizontal drilling, you could have a single well pad, and wells could be directionally drilled away from that well pad. So you could have 4 or 5 wells from a single location, thus resulting in about 2 million gallons of this drilling mud. To put that into perspective, 2 million gallons would be an area about the size of a football field and 6 feet deep. So that is a large volume to have to dispose. To address this potential for waste being generated from horizontal drilling, the statute was amended to exempt drilling waste from obtaining a permit from the Bureau of Waste Management and establish the application process through the Corporation Commission. Since 2012, that projected increase in horizontal drilling practices just did not happen in the state of Kansas. And as was mentioned during the reading of the fiscal note, the last application received was in May of 2013, and no other applications have been submitted since that day. After a recent review of regulations, KDHE consulted with the Corporation Commission to determine if there was still a need for this land spreading permit exemption. And since the horizontal drilling did not occur, along with some other industry changes, it just is not and has not been used. So it is recommended that the statute and subsequently the associated regulations governing land spreading without a permit be rescinded. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of this bill, and I welcome any questions from the committee.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Dahm? Representative Fairchild?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I mean, you've basically said that it hasn't been used, and so if it hasn't been used, then what exactly is the purpose of changing the statute?
It would be reducing regulations that are not being used in accordance with a statute that was passed during last session.
Representative Mosley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't like the word piggybacking, but to expand on his question, I guess my ultimate question is getting rid of this regulation because it's not being utilized as much in Kansas. Is that practice being utilized elsewhere where it could potentially be something that will come along the line and now there's no regulation and we have to return back to reinstating that regulation? Or is that just like an obsolete practice? It's no longer the best practice for how to procure oil?
I would have to defer to my counterpart at the Corporation Commission to be able to answer if that practice is still in use in other areas and if there's a potential for it to come to Kansas again. As was mentioned earlier, there is still the ability to obtain a permit from Department of Health and Environment, Bureau of Waste Management, if they wanted to go forward with the land spreading option.
And then probably my final question. Was this something that was just decided amongst government officials, or did someone else outside of the government bring this to you all to say that we want to have this deregulated? Was this more so like experts in the government came together and said, let's get rid of this regulation, or is there like an outside entity that also wants this regulation to be dismantled?
This is primarily inside of the government. Annually, a report is prepared and submitted to the legislature documenting that we have not had any applications submitted, and year after year we have the same conversation. Is it time to get rid of this?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll go back to you, Representative Blex, then Fairchild.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I think it's a good deal. We a lot of times gripe about over-regulation. I think this is a good example where professionals have worked on both sides in the industry, as well as health and safety of the protection of the environment, and eliminated a regulation that is no longer being used and utilized. So I appreciate that, and thank you for doing it.
Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to better understand the details of the bill. It seems to me like it's not necessarily reducing or increasing a regulation, but just changing who it goes through, right? Because it was going through the Corporation Commission, and this bill is changing it to go through the Secretary of Health and Environment. Is that an accurate way to describe it?
Yes, that is.
And maybe, okay, and then maybe Mr. Hoffman can talk about it from the KCC standpoint. So very good. Other questions? And that's kind of the whole thing is, you know, it's a fairly simple bill. It's more of a cleanup bill. And again, not put words in anybody's mouth, but it's more of a, we're not losing any regulation. It's simply a matter of something that really is not done and can still, is there maybe one company maybe that's even doing this now? And so it's just one of those that maybe if we don't do it, Koji in the Senate might, because I know they're, you know, focus on regulations, which is fine. I don't know, but I think we can also learn from KCC kind of their, I'm sure there was discussion there. So other questions? Seeing no, will you be available in case we have any follow-up here before we close the hearing? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up now as the proponent will be Ryan Hoffman, the Director of Conservation Division within the KCC. Welcome back to committee, Mr. Ryan. Ryan, here we go again. Mr. Hoffman. There's the Hoffman. There we go. See?
Yes, Chair Rogers, I think that if you were to ask Representative Hoffman, he would be quick to confirm there is no relation.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me here today, committee. I have fairly brief testimony. In 2015, when the original bill was about to sunset, I appeared and said, go ahead and keep this. You know, it's only 2 years old. This is supposed to help horizontal well drilling development in the state of Kansas. Maybe we should leave it on the books and see what happens. Here we are almost 10 years later, and nothing has happened. So it proved that it was not the economic driver or the difference maker for the horizontal well drillers to stay. At the time that this was enacted, there were 100 to 200 horizontal wells being drilled a year. We're less than 20 a year now in Kansas, if that. And as far as if the practice is still viable in other states, the only other state I knew where it was Oklahoma. And that was the driving force that brought it to Kansas, was the majority of the people drilling horizontal wells were coming out of Oklahoma. And the rationale we often heard was, well, they allow us to do this in Oklahoma. So that I think a lot of times what's good in one state isn't necessarily good in the others. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions if you have them.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Hoffman? Representative Droege?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your input here. Does this, will it have a future dampening effect on drilling? And I assume they can still get a permit. Is it going to be real difficult? Or, I mean, I'm sure KDHE wants to look at what it's going to do, but it wouldn't put a impassable hurdle in front of them, would it?
No, they would still be able to apply for the regular permit through KDHE. This just created a different process that brought us into it. And I don't think it's necessary anymore.
Other questions? So again, maybe just kind of walk us through this. 10 years later, it hasn't developed like we thought it would 10 years ago. So I think we're all maybe, is a place to park it is really what is that what we're doing?
I think maybe rather than park it, it's we're going to go ahead and just decommission it. It's not necessarily a practice that ever really took off. If you think about the precipitation in Kansas, and there were a lot of factors that went into what was still in the solids, than the precipitation rates in Kansas. When you think about where the horizontal drilling was happening, it didn't make a whole lot of sense at the time. And it makes, I think, less sense now with less people doing it.
Okay, very good. Other questions? Representative Mosier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Where did the limited amount of horizontal drilling take place in the state?
The horizontal drilling was primarily in south central Kansas and a little to the west. There was exploring in multiple counties. I think the one time this happened, it might have actually been in Reno County, and the one attempt failed because it rained and they couldn't keep going, so they had to stop halfway through.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. And Mr. Hoffman will be back in mere moments with another presentation on an update on the abandoned well situation. So we also have in your online in the packet of information written only proponent Charlie Hunt, the Director of Johnson County Department of Health and Environment. That's all I have for proponents. Anyone else here to speak as a proponent of House Bill 2064? Seeing none, anyone here to testify as a neutral to House Bill 2064? Seeing none, anyone here as an opponent to House Bill 2064? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2064. Up next is another annual event we look forward to, and that's hearing what's going on at the College of Agriculture at Kansas State University. And it is yet again a pleasure to bring Dr. Ernie Minton, the Dean, the Eldon Gideon Dean of the College of Agriculture at the K-State Research and Extension. And I noticed that your glasses also have a little purple hue to them. That's pretty cool. So
naturally they would, particularly
yes.
this week.
Yes. So Dr. Minton will give us the update and have questions here in a little bit. So welcome back to committee, Dean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee. It's a pleasure to be here. And as Caroline is getting us connected, I'll just take this little bit to say I've been in this role as dean since 2018, permanent dean since 2019. This is my swan song presentation to the legislature. As of the end of this coming calendar year, or excuse me, fiscal year, I'll be stepping down as dean, staying on to help close a fundraising gap I'll share with you here in just a little bit. But it's been a pleasure, particularly over the years, to interact with this committee. All right, I think we're ready now. So I believe this presentation, I think there are 15 slides, and they're tiled up for you there in a couple of sheets. So I want to spend a good bit of time updating you on, so we have a booklet and we also have the slides there in front of you and the staple sheets as well. Updating you on our exciting infrastructure news on campus, also some kind of late breaking but very, very positive things with regard to our enrollment and some proposed curriculum additions that will be very, very exciting. And then some other news across the state with regard to our efforts in irrigation and TAPS and a growing relationship with Garden City Community College. So sort of owing to the new campus-wide strategic plan that is titled Next Generation Land Grant, the title of our slides today are Next Generation Agriculture. And here I have a quote from our president, Rich Linton, who's brought a new sense of how we look at, how we're looking at this revitalization of infrastructure in the College of Agriculture here at K-State as a mechanism to deliver multidisciplinary programming, traditional disciplinary program, but also bring in multiple disciplines, both on campus, but also in the form of public-private partnerships that bring professionals to work shoulder to shoulder with our faculty to really innovate in a new and very different way. And that'll be coming down the pike here in the next couple of years as we get into these new facilities. So we call this particular collection of projects the Agriculture Innovation Initiative. I'll elaborate a little bit on the next slide with regard to some specifics, but it's basically a collection of new construction, mostly on 3 sites. That's the Agronomy Research and Innovation Center just north of Bill Snyder Stadium. Further east on Kimball, the Bilbrey Family Event Center, which is essentially a replacement for a replacement plus our Weber Hall Arena that has come down. And then finally, on campus, we have a new construction that's coming up between Call and Weber Hall, the Global Center for Grain and Food Innovation. And along with that building, significant renovations to Call and Weber Hall. And in particular, we're really focusing a lot of resources to bring our dairy processing facilities and also our meat processing facilities up to speed, as well as some other modernizations throughout those buildings. We are then eventually demolishing Schellenberger Hall and Feed Technology Hall to take them off the deferred maintenance ledger. And as I mentioned, we've already taken down Weber Hall. So this is a $210 million project in total, and we're 90% there. I want to point out that going back to the legislative session in 2022 and 2023, with some matching that was required for those dollars, we received $75 million in total across both of those sessions from the legislature, and we certainly appreciate that. But what I want to emphasize with this bar is just how we've been able to leverage that public investment with private philanthropy. And we've got a ways to go, but we're 90% there. 90% of 210, though, is still $20 million, and that's why I'm staying on after I step down as dean. So this is kind of a bit of summary of what happened in 2024, and I'd point your attention to some key events. In 2024, in May, we had the groundbreaking for the Global Center. A few of you were there, just east of Weber Hall for that event. In October, we had a beam signing ceremony, which is a lot of fun for the Bilbrey Family Event Center. This year, we anticipate the opening of the first of the buildings in this Ag Innovation Complex, the Bilbrey Event Center in fall semester 2025. And then in 2026, we expect the balance of the new buildings to be completed. We may still have some renovations that are coming along beyond 2026 in Call and Weber Hall, but the bulk of this project will be completed by the end of the calendar year in 2026. A good bit of excitement because this is the first construction we've had on the main campus in nearly 50 years. So we're really very, very excited about that activity. On to a few slides about academics. So we had a really great hire individual that we were recruited from Texas A&M, a grain food scientist who became the department head for our Department of Grain Sciences and Industry. And just very quickly, for those of you who maybe are not familiar with that department, it's a one-of-a-kind. It offers bachelor's and graduate degrees in milling science, bakery science, and used to be feed science. Now it's called feed and pet food science. And And so this individual, as a food scientist, is a perfect fit for what we want to accomplish in the new Global Center, a real multidisciplinary approach to research and innovation. And we think we'll bring together those disciplines of food science and all of those in grain science across also to our College of Health and Human Sciences and Engineering, to really bring a focus on some very specific areas in the value-added food space. And we hope also to bring that work, to bring a focus to the human health aspects of that value-added food as well. So indeed, we're really very, very pleased to have Dr. Awika join us on the faculty. I've got a couple of slides here with some numbers, and I'm not going to read every single one of them to you, but I'll just point out a few. We continue to award over $2 million in the College of Agriculture to scholarships and various forms of financial aid, which is very, very important, I think, and a part of, not the total explanation for, but a part of our the growth that finally has come back to the college in terms of increased numbers of undergraduate students, an excellent placement rate of 97%. So we have very, very few students who, after completing their degree, have a job waiting, or they've elected to continue their education in veterinary school or graduate school, whatever the case might be. We continue to have a very positive student-to-faculty ratio, and also I'd point out that by third-party niche.com, which we have no control over, we're rated again among the top 10 in ag colleges. This is across the entire country. And so these are among other schools who much, much larger endowments, a much larger population base in their state to pull from, and so forth. So we're really proud of the performance of the College of Agriculture against that very stiff competition across other land grants. We continue to offer a number of opportunities for our students for experiences within our college, for undergraduate jobs, and a great number of opportunities with clubs and judging teams, and you've probably maybe have seen some of the successes of those extracurricular activities for students. I want to highlight for you a couple of innovative things that we're just on the front end of. We're in the process on campus of proposing a new bachelor's degree in applied sciences and general agriculture. We think this will find a place with many, many students who do not want to narrow their focus necessarily to a single discipline like agronomy or animal science or ag econ, which we've had some expression of interest from students for. And then this past December, our president and Garden City Community College President Ryan Ruda sat down at a table in Garden City and signed a memorandum of understanding that committed us to working towards delivering 4-year degrees out in western Kansas. Again, we're on the front end of planning for that, but that commitment was the first step in terms of beginning those conversations with folks with GCCC, also the City of Garden City and Finney County. So we're excited about that. I want to focus on a few areas of excellence in research. Our feedlot, which is not part of the Ag Innovation Initiative, is another one of those key structures which has run its course in terms of its useful lifespan. And because of the importance of the cattle feeding industry in the state of Kansas and to the agricultural economy, we think it's important that K-State continue to have, for our students, for our teaching, for our research, in furtherance to innovation in that area, a research and teaching feedlot on campus. And so we're in the process of raising those funds entirely privately. We've had a significant naming opportunity which occurred just before the end of the calendar year, and I think was announced last night at NCBA. I wasn't there. Our Associate Dean, Dr. Jane Hsu, was there, and a challenge to help us get the remaining dollars that we need for that beef feedlot. So we're excited about that. Again, no state funds involved in the construction of that particular building. So this is a 1,200 one-time capacity lot with small pens, 100 small pens with 12 animals per pen, just right for a research setting. This is a program on the next slide, Testing Ag Performance Solutions, which I think many of you know as TAPS. This is a program, just very briefly, that we have initiated. Our first run at this occurred this past crop year at our Colby Station in northwest Kansas, where teams of competitors, so this is a unique extension activity that brings together elements of research as well. But we hired a really top-flight irrigation engineer from the University of Nebraska who brought this TAPS program, and we're just getting it off the ground here in Kansas. And so maybe 3 weeks ago in Dodge City, we had the first celebration of the results of those teams. It was an exciting event, and a few of you were there, I know. But in this particular case, teams of farmers, ag bankers, it could be any number of folks from the community that come together to form teams to get in a competition with other teams and maybe their neighbors to select their corn hybrid variety, their nitrogen application, their marketing approach, and importantly, their approach to adding irrigation water. And so, again, the hope is education and a drive towards efficiency to hit, we hope, as close to what's referred to in the slide as Q stable. That's the level of irrigation water that can be applied that will leave the aquifer unchanged after the growing season. So much more to come. Year 2 is already being planned. We intend to add a forage component to that as well as a grain component. So we're very pleased with how TAPS is turning out here in Kansas. And we're looking forward to its future as well. So the College of Agriculture and K-State Research and Extension has the major research footprint on the university campus. And these are our external award successes. And with the exception of a dip there in 2021 during or immediately after the COVID lockdown, we've had significant growth in the success of our faculty in obtaining extramural funds year over year. The most common source of those federal funds is from the USDA, but we also receive funds from NSF, occasionally from the National Institutes of Health. We also receive funds from USAID, so we have some concern there, obviously. But we also receive funds from private industry as well that we really leverage against the success and investment that you all place in the faculty salaries for those individuals competing for those grants. This is a different measure of research, of our research footprint. It's called research expenditures. And so this is the backside of research accounting. You spend $1, and if it's coded for research, it gets added to this total. This is the whoops. This is the number that is reported annually from all research universities across the U.S. And I just want to make the point there and just draw your attention between the size, the height of the purple bars, which is the total university research expenditures, and the green bars are the College of Agriculture and K-State Research and Extension. So we have and manage over half of the research expenditures on the campus at K-State. That's probably where it should be as the land-grant university in the state, and the college responsible for that's closest to Kansas food and agriculture. I'm going to finish here with a slide that we always share with the committee, and that is the major sources of our funding that are represented there with these 3 pie charts. So in the top row, the Agricultural Experiment Station is the label that is associated with our research function. Extension speaks for itself, and then at the bottom, College of Agriculture, that reflects the academic side of the house. The green dollars are our state appropriations, and you can see the slice of the pie that they are there. And I would just say in summary, without spending a lot of time on any one of those pies, that we take those green dollars to pay the salaries of our people, our faculty mostly, but also our support staff. And we ask those faculty to turn those into research awards, to teaching awards, and in some cases, extension awards. All of a good bit of the work, for example, that Darren Rudnick does with TAPS would be a combination of research and extension awards. So that investment in people leverages itself into our capacity to bring impact into the state of Kansas. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to say our future is bright. We're very, very excited about the future of the college going forward.
All right, Dean Minton, thank you so much, and thank you for your long career at Kansas State University, and glad you're sticking around, and as all the excitement continues on, and what you've done and stepping in the last few years to kind of keep things going. It's been appreciative, and we look forward to, see what the future holds as well. So questions
Thank you.
for the Dean? Great job. Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dean Minton, for that presentation. Quick question. The enrollment in animal science, was that the highest it's ever been?
Yes, it is. Thank you for mentioning that, actually. Our largest department in the college is also animal sciences and industry, is also the largest academic department on the campus of Kansas State University. And we had record enrollment of, and I'm going to just, having not looked at it lately, I'm going to say 1160. And we're pushing 60% out-of-state students there. Now, the thing about that's telling is that we're attracting, scholarshiping is part of it, but we also reputationally have a brand there with that department. And I think students who are in Ohio, in Michigan, in Illinois, and where their in-state land-grant university caps enrollment, we have an opportunity to attract those students. Sometimes they pay the full rate in terms of tuition, but also we're often able to balance that with scholarshiping opportunities. But they appreciate the focus on production agriculture in that department, our focus on applied learning in the form of livestock judging and meats judging and those kinds of things. And so if they want to have hands-on experience and animal units that are accessible easily from campus, those are the things that we can sell. And I would say that department in particular does a fantastic job with reaching out and recruiting students, and it's showing.
I have one more.
One more, quick. I'm sure I'm not going to be the first person that's told you this, but I was really sad when Weber was raised. I have a lot of wonderful memories there, so go Cats.
Many of us
Thank
do.
you.
Thank you, yes, yeah.
I thought you could make some money by just, the bricks or just the dirt, underneath the windows. My daughter competed in the rodeo queen competition when she was there, and I thought, I was there for several cattlemen's days as well. I think the same dirt was there 40 years ago when I was a
think so.
freshman. It still
Yeah,
was there.
it
No.
goes up in the air and comes back down.
But it was. There was a lot of us from that certain era that yes. But I'm looking forward to the new exciting facilities. I just hope one way we'll be able, and before we go to the next one, I hope in this whole process, whoever's listening and with your guidance, we continue to work on infrastructure. As we continue to have students there, that it's easier to get a little easier to get around campus. I know there's been some discussion of, trying to close a lot of those, and there already been some through campus, but that's one of the things I think that makes us unique over many of them as well. So hopefully, the powers that be will take that into consideration in the grand plan. I'm not saying get rid of any green space because we have some great, by Anderson, keep that lawn right where it is. But anyway, Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question that kind of comes from my K-State football neighbors who the last game of the year wanted to know what was going on with the dairy barn. They'd kind of gotten a confused narrative of the funding coming and going. And I was just curious of where that stands right now.
The dairy milking facility, or not the Call Hall Dairy Bar?
Like the big giant, we've received a great presentation on this whole new dairy project.
Yes, so that is another one of our facilities that is in dire need of replacement. But we have to come to the Kansas Board of Regents with building priorities, and we still have the Ag Innovation Initiative, which has an active fundraising going on. So our president and Vice President Marshall Stewart had interactions with KBOR with regard to the dairy. It's one that we support, but it's not officially on our list as a project that's ready for active fundraising from us. It needs replacement, however, that's not the issue.
Representative Minix.
I want to thank Dean Minton for the leadership he's shown, and I look at the time period from 2018 to now as being an extremely difficult time period. To go through COVID, a reduction in students, to the students are coming back, we're rebuilding. You've raised $189 million for some of these projects. You've done an amazingly good job, and I want to say thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay. Representative Rozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dean Minton. I'm Angel Roser. I represent the west side of Manhattan, so from College Avenue all the way to Cobra Hills and south to Genesis.
Nice.
So I want to say thank you for your presentation and your time. I wanted to ask if there were any contracts in place with the new facility replacing Weber. I know that there were talks of contracts that might build some income for that facility, whether that be with the Call Valley Rodeo Association, PRCA, WPRA, or anything of those sorts.
There are no contracts in place yet for and I think you're referring to the Bilbrey Family Event Center. But I will say that the aspiration for that facility is for it to house both, or to meet both the academic needs of the College of Agriculture, which would be, again, our own collegiate rodeo, our Cattlemen's Day, many other youth events and so forth. But the other aspirational thing for that particular event center is for it to occupy up to 30 weekend events annually, and that most likely will come in the form of additional rodeos, equine events, cattle events, and so forth. But there are no contracts in place just yet.
Thank you so much.
Last call. It was your last one. You should have brought Call Hall ice cream. So disappointing. It's Tuesday.
I
No,
should have.
But no. Okay, the last questions. All right, and I know since I guess the chairs actually do run the meeting, so I believe it's the chair's prerogative that we give Dean Minton a round of applause for his efforts.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Appreciate that recognition.
Thank you. And the work you've done. My intern is from Virginia as a freshman at Kansas State University. Not a family legacy, but she said this was the best program to get to, and so she made her back safe for the semester, and so we're ready to continue on. So again, thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thank you.
All right. Now we have one more, and we'll bring in Ryan Hoffman again from the KCC, and he will talk about an update on what's going on with our abandoned wells. So welcome back.
Chair Rogers, members of the committee, thank you. It's great to be back. Today, I will talk to you about what's going on with abandoned wells in Kansas. It seems to be a fairly large topic nationally right now. And I have a presentation that we'll show you parts of, and you should have it in front of you that you can follow along. There are four main questions that I always get asked, and I want to try to address those as part of my presentation. But before I do that, I would like to provide a little context about abandoned well plugging in Kansas. And
Right, we're trying to find it online. I don't think it's in there, is it? His testimony? Okay, that's
well,
fine.
we'll make sure you have a copy of it.
Is that other screen on? Okay. Well, okay. Hang on a second, Ryan. So I guess what we'll have to do for now is watch the screens. Somebody had the game on, I'm guessing, and then they turned it off. So, well, they're what, 4 years old? It's probably, well, I don't want to hold you up, so we'll give one.
Well, this isn't anything that you need to see. It's not in there.
Okay.
The context,
Anyway.
the history.
All right, go ahead.
The KCC has had an abandoned well plugging program since 1996. And July 1, 1996 is the magical date because any well that was drilled prior to July 1, 1996 was responsible to be plugged by the Legacy Fund. Anyone after July 1, 1996 was the Well Plugging Assurance Fund. They had two different funding streams, and that's how we operated. We had a geologist in our Wichita office. He had anywhere from 2 to 3 field agents, mostly operating in eastern Kansas. If you were to scroll down a little bit, you can see the map. The majority of those were in District 3, which is our eastern Kansas area. And rolling along that program, the way it was constituted, plugged roughly 10,000 wells. But around 2018, 2019, we decided it was time to make a change. And what we did is, instead of having everything run out of the Wichita office, we decided to give our local districts control. And that map on the screen shows how our districts are split up. We have an office in Hayes, an office in Dodge City, an office in Wichita, and an office in Chanute. And what we did is we elevated one of our staff members there to be a well plugging coordinator. So they were responsible to work with the geology supervisor for that district to put together projects. And the position in Wichita became more of an account manager. Their job was to make sure the bills got paid and everything got done according to state rules. And we went out and we started recruiting new contractors because the old system really ran into a stalemate, and we had the same people doing the the same work, and there wasn't really much movement there. The way it was structured back then is each one of these 4 districts had separate plugging contracts. So there, at any point in time, we could have 4 different plugging contracts statewide, and our contractors had to bid to be on each one of those different contracts. We changed that, and I'll talk more about that later in terms of this presentation, but we ended up going with just one contract and decided it was time to make changes to our abandoned well plugging statute. And we came to this body in 2020, and then COVID killed that bill, so that we came back in 2021 and 2022, and we're able to move forward with just a single plugging fund. And now we are structured such that we have more staff working on the issue. And before I turn the page, I would be remiss if I didn't note that when we came seeking that initial fund, our geologist, who is in District 3, put together a riveting DVD that the supervising geologist picked up on their way from Chanute to Topeka to give the presentation, and played it sight unseen for the legislature. And I have seen it, and I can assure you that the quality of work was such that it created the abandoned well plugging program. And if you would turn the page now, that first question I get is, how do you plug an abandoned well? And I put this question out to the 4 supervising geologists, and I said, I'm a lawyer, help me explain it to other people in a way that makes sense, that I won't have to answer a lot of questions. And the first response I got was, well, tell them we do it just like we make operators do it, with cement. And Kenny, keep those dynamite contributions coming, but I needed more than that. So thankfully, the gentleman who made the DVD back in 1995-96 was able to draw me some wellbore diagrams. And that's what you have right here on your screen, is what we would call a typical Western Kansas Class 2 well. And a Class 2 is the type of injection well under the Underground Injection Control Program that the EPA has given Kansas authority under the Safe Water Drinking Act. So the KCCA is responsible for the Class 2 injection wells that are related to oil and gas, and then KDHE has the other classes. What you see here is a typical construction, and if you were to plug this well, you would take everything out of the inside of that well bore. So there's corrosion inhibiting fluid, you would take that out. There's tubing, you would take that out. There's a packer, you would remove that. And then you can see down below the red are the open perforations. So you would run a string of tubing down to about 100 feet above there. You would set a cement plug. Then you would fill that space with gel till there's a line that says annular space. It's probably really hard to see, but what we would be looking for is an anhydrite column, or a formation, I should say. We would set cement then from there all the way to the surface, so that all of the materials or anything that's below that point cannot circulate up to even the usable water, which necessarily isn't fresh water, but even up to the fresh water. And then once that cement is set, they would cut it off and bury it. And then another example is on the next page, and this is what we're calling a typical Eastern Kansas well. And you'll notice the different construction right away, in that there is nothing going down this annular space, or the well bore there, what's labeled as the long string. Here, that is cemented in place from surface to bottom. And then what we would do in this case, since we don't have to remove anything out of the hole, we would run a string down to the bottom, set a cement plug over those perforations, wait a day, let it dry, come back, run back down, and tag it to make sure it was there and that it worked. And then we would fill that well bore up with cement and move on. So those are 2 of the common ways we would plug an abandoned well. And if those answers don't satisfy your desire for more information on that, then I will make sure that case comes with me the next time and he can answer those questions. If you scroll to the next page, there's a graph, because the question always is, well, how much does it cost? And a good answer to that is, well, it depends. A lot of it depends on where you are in the state. The size of the wellbore, the depth of the wellbore, all of those things, the age of the wellbore, all of that impacts what it costs. The chart here shows what the state paid over the last fiscal year for plugging wells. And our fiscal year is the same as everybody else. It's July 1 to June 30th. And one of the things that I would note, if you remember the map from the beginning, is those wells in District 3 are much shallower, and they're not as round. Their diameter is less. So therefore, we can plug more of them, and they usually cost a lot less to plug. And I also should note that oil and gas development in Kansas started in Eastern Kansas, and depending upon when you look, somewhere between the 1860s and 1890s, and then moved west. So there are more wells in eastern Kansas. And the one thing that really jumps out if you're looking at that chart, the bottom chart is the statewide average. You can see that we went from 7,000 per well to over 13,000 to this past year, 18,700. And a lot of that is what you would think. Inflation drove up costs for materials. There was a labor shortage, so we had to pay people more to plug. But on top of that, you'll notice the number of wells plugged went way down, and part of that is we had a bunch of federal money we were using to plug wells. So instead, we took the state money and we focused on some of the worst wells we could. There are several, in both of those fiscal years, in 23 and 24, there were projects that involved wells near gas storage fields. It takes a lot of money to plug wells near gas storage fields because of all the extra precautions and different types of materials you have to use. So those are some of the explainers for why those costs are up. And then if you go to the next chart, this shows you the history of the program from that July 1, 1996 date. You can see how much we spent plugging wells, how many wells we plugged, and then what the average cost per well was. And I hadn't really paid much attention to this chart prior to preparing for this testimony, and that $42.5 million figure spent plugging wells in less than 30 years, I think, is a pretty impressive number to think about how that's been done. And over 11,000 wells plugged during that time frame. And if you go to the next page, please. All right, here is probably one of the harder questions to answer, and that is, how many abandoned wells are there? And one of the reasons it's hard to answer is because when our database was formed, and like I mentioned, well drilling started long before paper records. We as a commission, as we're currently constructed, came into existence in about 1932 or 33. Real good paper records started in the 50s, and then getting all of that information digitized and into a database happened sometime in the 80s and 90s. And when it happened, our data came from 6 different sources. Those different sources could have different information on the same well, so that information shows up as a record. And sometimes they have good identifying information, and sometimes they don't. So this pie chart, the most important thing that you take away from my presentation today is that this is records. Not wells, but records of wells. So to answer the question about how many abandoned wells are there in Kansas, I would point to that top right light blue pie wedge. That's 6,441 wells that are designated as PL. PL means that record is on our plugging list. It got on our plugging list via commission order. That means that it once was associated with an active operator's license. That operator is gone. The commission has issued an order and said, put those on the plugging list and plug them as you have funds available. Those, I can confidently say, are wells. Then there's a small wedge up there that says 203. That 203 is labeled PP, and that stands for plugging project. And those are wells that have either been plugged using federal money or slated to be plugged using federal money. Those are real wells. The rest of these are records, and I'll walk through each one of the colors. The orange wheel, the 5,068, those are wells that are listed as spudded, and spudded is a term of art in the oil and gas industry. It means when the drill bit breaks ground, it's spud. Operators are required to call and notify our office prior to doing that. So what this means is we have 5,068 records of some sort where somebody had said there was a well going to be drilled. Not necessarily an intent or a piece of paper, but a record of a phone call. Then the gray wedge is drilled. So that we have some indicator that a well was drilled there. Then the yellow wedge is our abandoned well database. This was the database that was formed in 1996 when we started our plugging program. The records in that could be duplicates of the other records. They could be triplicates of the other records. For instance, this year, that number shrunk by about 1,000 because our District 3 staff, where 98% of these wells are located, spent, I'm not going to say inordinate, but they spent quite a bit of time working on that issue and identified over 1,000 well records that did not belong there because they had an identification number, something else that they could quantify that well so they could remove it as a potential abandoned well. And then the blue wedge is a well that's designated as inactive on an inactive license. And then the other two are smaller. One stands for an expired plugging intent, and the other, or plugging permit, and the other is already classified as abandoned. If you remove the knowns from the unknowns here, you still have about 18,600. So that means there are 18,600 records that we have to go through. And that sounds daunting, and it probably is going to be. But one of the things that I like to maybe get some hope from is that historically, when we do this, what we find is about a third of whatever number we think, whatever number this is, turns out to actually be a well. And in a lot of cases, those wells are already associated somewhere else, and we can, what we call merge, delete, and get rid of these records. So there's a lot of work to be done, clearly, but I don't want you to walk out here saying, wow, they got 18,000 wells. They really need to get to work. They haven't been doing anything. Just know that these are records that we're researching. If you scroll to the next, you might, after seeing those numbers, be wondering, well, doesn't sound like you're doing much. What are you doing? Well, aside from our state plugging program where we plugged over 11,000 wells, as part of that, we streamlined the process. I mentioned we went to one contract. We went out, we recruited, and instead of having 3 or 4 contractors throughout the state, we have 23 now. So whenever a project is put out for bid, there are 23 people notified statewide. They have an opportunity to bid and go plug wells. We changed our website so that it's easier to find information about how to become a contract plugger and easier to find information on these well pluggings. We used to utilize Purple Wave, but we broke it, so now we use govdeals.com to sell salvage material from the wells we plug, and that money goes back into the plugging fund. And we have submitted and received back the first draft of proposed plugging reimbursement regulations whereby anybody can plug a well and then get reimbursed out of the state plugging fund, so they wouldn't have to go through the contracting process. Maybe beyond those state things, the bipartisan infrastructure law had 3 different plugging grants associated with it: the initial grant, the formula grant, and the performance grant. And we have already been through the initial grant. I'll talk about that some, but we applied for, there were 2 different types, a $25 million or a $5 million grant. When it came out, there was a real short window for the $25 million application, and based on that chart, you can probably tell that my attitude was there's no way we're going to be able to spend $25 million in a year or 2, or how are we going to come up with enough wells in this short 90-day time frame to do this? And I am all over YouTube saying that to people who would listen. Turns out I was wrong. Our district supervisors came to me and said, we think we can do this. We think we can put together the packages. And what you're looking at on the bottom there are the packages that we put together. There were 8 total packages that we put out for bid. They contained, I want to say, roughly 2,500 wells. And then you can turn to the next page. We received bids on 6 of the projects. You notice the 2 in far western Kansas did not get any bids. But this right here, the initial program, we had bids for 2,295 of the wells to get plugged. We've ended up so far since January 16th, 2023 through January 23rd of this year, so a little over 2 years, we've plugged 2,513 wells and spent just over $25 million. And we were able to do that because of things like selling the salvageable equipment. So we went beyond our grant dollars, and we've used that revenue to plug more wells. As the note shows, we plugged an additional 218 wells, and there's still 40 more that will be plugged. And as we continue to get salvage from the projects we plug, we're going to keep going with that grant to plug more wells. We went and recently extended those. If you'll go to the next map, please. This is the formula grant map. The formula grant is simple. There were 3 parts that went into it. How many abandoned wells do you have? How many do you think, or how much do you think it's going to cost to plug them, and how many jobs did you lose in the oil and gas sector during a time frame representative of COVID? Department of Interior granted us or awarded us $33.6 million. They allocated into several phases. The phase 1 application was due in December of 2023. We made our application. They decided to take no action on our application because in the bipartisan infrastructure law, there were several sections of how the law applied, and these sections had a lot of may. A state may do this, a state may do that, but when it said the federal government plugging wells on federal land, they shall do things. They wanted us to shall some of the mays, and we decided not to, and it's looking like that may have been a good idea because in phase 2, they came back and said, we're going to do this all over again the next year, but instead of just 25 million, you can go for your full 33.6. So we submitted that application on December 13th, which happened to be a Friday of 2024. Hopefully that's not an omen, but that application has not been acted on, but we are hopeful that some of the impediments we were running into with regard to the language in the grant will allow us to plug another 1,875 to 2,300 wells with this round. And you can kind of see where we have those ideas of where we're going to plug. Because the additional 8.6 million is available, I've gone back to our district supervisors and asked for more wells to be added to this, and we're looking at some more in central and southwestern Kansas. So hopefully we can get more wells plugged in the near future. And that the one of the 3 grants I didn't talk about were the performance grants. There's another $40 million that is potentially available there. So if this goes right, over the next 4 years, we could have another $76 or $73.6 million to spend plugging wells, which would be great. And if you go to the last page, please. I messed up my order of this, and I didn't realize it until after I submitted you the final copy, but ignore the pie chart for now. Pretend it's not there. The bottom part there is that there's a carbon market out there that is, I would say it's making people want to come to Kansas. And they want to come because they can plug wells and get carbon credits for those wells. We have at least 2 companies that are licensed right now and trying to get wells put on that license, so all they can do is plug the wells. And if you're listening and you're interested in that, call me. We'd be glad to set you up. What we do, that big blue wedge I showed you before of the PL wells, when they come and they talk to us and say, where do we find a list of your wells? We say, here it is. We show them where they can download it and tell them what to look for. And then they talk to us about it. And it's such a good idea that I think we're going to look into it as well. Because if it's something that we can do to help augment the funding for this program without coming to the legislature and asking for state general funds or going to the industry and asking for the industry to pay more, I think that it's viable and we need to investigate it and see what we can do. And now if you will scroll up so that we can see the pie chart, I'd appreciate it. When you talk about abandoned wells, I think a lot of it's kind of doom and gloom and like, oh man, this is such a daunting problem and you guys haven't been doing anything and what are you going to do going forward? And this is something that I always thought about and finally was able to figure out how to put it in a graph. Since the program's been around, you can see these are all the wells that have been plugged in the state of Kansas. That little orange wedge is 3% or 2,513. Those are the wells we plugged with federal money. The blue wedge is 12%, and those are the wells that have been plugged with state money. The gray is the vast majority of the 85% of the wells that have been plugged since the well plugging fund started. And that's over 75,000 wells have been plugged by industry in that same time frame. So that's another message that I'd like to leave is that when you talk about abandoned wells, you talk about the bad operators, the people who leave us with wells, but the majority of them are taking care of their regulatory obligations and plugging wells. When you say 85% of the wells plugged and you talk about 75,000 wells, that's a huge number. So with that, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Interesting. Questions? Representative Mosley, it's your day.
It is. And you may have already said this, but I'm actually very hungry, so it's been very hard to concentrate through this. But I'd have been listening. But how are you prioritizing which wells get closed first? You may have mentioned it, but if you...
I didn't.
All right,
that's a great
perfect.
question.
All right.
And it's done on a scale. We have priority 1, 2, and 3, or priority 1 and priority 2. Within priority 1, there are A's, which are our immediate threats. So if we find a well leaking somewhere, that's a priority A1. If it's a public safety hazard, that's 1. If it's a threat to groundwater or surface water, that's a 1A. Then next is a 1B. It's not an immediate threat, but it has the potential to be a threat. The majority of the ones that we try to plug are 1Bs, because if it's a 1A, one of our performance budgeting measures is that we get on it within 30 days, and it's no longer an issue within 30 days. We get on it sooner, but that's the goal, is that it's gone within 30 days. And then there are Cs, which are lower, and then priority 2 are not an immediate threat at all.
And then one other question. In an ideal world, when we could pay for things in Skittles and Magic, if you were able to pay for things that way, would you have enough people in the industry to be able to plug all the wells, or is it just that, is there a barrier to being able to get those wells plugged?
Not right now. Like I said, we have 23 contractors on our roll that are ready to go. So I think it's, for them, it's more about the price being right and the wells being close.
You can't pay in Skittles and Magic.
I would love to.
All right, thank you.
Very good. Other questions? Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Could you please describe for the group the salvageable materials that you referred to as far as adding back money to your coffers?
If you go back to how I kind of butchered the first plugging, when we take the tubular goods out, so all of the pipe that we pull out of the ground is something that has value, either to industry to reuse, or it's like a lot of it turns into fence posts. I recommend you don't turn it into playground equipment. That's not a good idea. Yeah, that's right. That's why we would want it to be. Representative Minnick said there's a chance for radioactivity, and that's why we would want to keep it away from kids. But then also any of the pump jacks, tanks, anything that's on site.
Other questions? What's the biggest challenge you have right now as this continues to move on?
Honestly, I had this discussion with a few people this morning, and I think the biggest one, because it's sort of a frustration that gets expressed to me, is, well, you have this big pie chart where you show all this work you need to do, and those wedges aren't shrinking fast enough. So I think right now we have one staff member who is dedicated to doing nothing but well record cleanup. I could probably have an army of them, but then even though they get through all of the paper records, somebody still has to go out into the field. They have to go with a metal detector with the snakes and the ticks or the ice. And I think it's always going to be a people versus record problem.
All right. Representative Gardner?
Yes, thank you. If we have constituents who ask us about wells, who do we send them to in your department?
I would send them to that first page, that map there. That district office would be their first person they need to contact, because they'll be closest to respond.
Okay, thank you.
And I can get you that contact information if you would like. It's published on our website with the map.
Okay. Last call. Anyone? All right, Ryan, thanks again for being here today. I know it all kind of worked out that we were able, when you were going to be here, to do this and give us the update. So thank you so much.
I appreciate you working with me, sir. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Now we're up to date on wells too. So as you can see, this is all kind of building up to next week with all the different bills we have. So don't worry if we're confused. Dana will make sure everything works good. So tomorrow, we have a hearing on a bill, correct? 2111. That's the crap bill. Yes. Okay. So bring your computer or bring your notes. And so I don't think it should take too long, but it's an important bill. So anything else to go to the cause? Tomorrow is just Wednesday, so don't get too excited. So. Thank you, whoever brought it is, right? It's just Tuesday, right? Yeah. Okay. Thanks, whoever brought the summer sausage and the crackers. Who was it? Oh, this is your stuff? Very good. All right, very good. Thank you. And if the gallery, there's a few left, is that all right, Representative? Folks want some, that'd be great. We are adjourned.